good to have polling data and focus groups informing your messaging and your interviews and all of that. But even David Pack.
Ezra Klein is very smart, but in my opinion, he should have adopted Destiny's take on the double standards.
Packman was talking about this recently with the Kamala Harris staffer, that Democrats have gotten to the point where they don't even seem to realize, like, what are they even running for? Because they seem just so paralyzed when they're in front of the media that they kind of end up rambling, or it just...
This feels like concern trolling. This feels like concern trolling. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, okay? Like, this feels like Straighterade is being a Democratic Party anti-fan. That's what it feels like. I don't think she's critiquing the Democrats in good faith, just based off of her history and based off of who she is. Actually, if anything, I'm being nice about her right now, okay? Because you know what we usually call her? Straighterade, the great betrayer, butcher of orbits, flagrant of DGG. But you know, I'm just trying to be nice, okay?
They're not responsive to questions in the moments from journalists that are inoffensive, asking them about their agenda, and they're just doing everything that they can to like not get into the specifics. And I think that that really reduces voter confidence in the candidate and the party as a whole, when it seems like the people that are running just don't really seem to stand for anything. And it's obvious that they're constantly trying to play all sides to not alienate anybody. But when you try not to alienate anybody, I feel like you uninspire everybody and you alienate almost everybody, because it doesn't seem like you have any fight in you.
So I saw the same interview that you're talking about, and I think he helped her during her 2020 primary. I don't think he was a staffer in 2024. But he was sort of getting at what you're talking about, which is like,
Destiny take is really extreme. Most people are not capable of that rhetoric. At most, you'll get Adam Mockler, but Ezra had it worse because of Ben Shapiro. The Ben Shapiro shit was really bad. From what I saw Destiny reacting to it, and from what I saw, I was not pleased with the way that Ezra Klein was handling Ben Shapiro either. So yeah,
there's this perception of inauthenticity that's sort of a problem in the Democratic Party right now, and I don't even necessarily disagree, but that's a pretty nebulous kind of strategy that you're putting forward here. So like I asked you, what's your plan to get like bigger,
nebulous, Hutch? I'm saying that they need to look at the issues that are the most popular among Democrats, that poll the best if they're interested in looking at polls, and they need to be outspoken about running on those issues unapologetically.
How is that going to help them in like Wyoming or Montana?
You didn't ask me how I was going to help women in Wyoming specifically. You asked me how are Dems supposed to get more seats, and I'm saying this is how they can get more seats. They need to be authentic, come off as authentic, and have a platform that they run on, stick to, and are unapologetic with, and they're not constantly like worried, like, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing and it be used against me. Like, stand for something and just run on that and go with it.
I mean,
dude, this is like baby's politics. Isn't every single political decision, every single negotiation filled with pros and cons? Isn't everything technically a part of the political calculus that you have to take? Like, isn't negotiation a part of politics naturally? Like you really think extreme policies are just being passed because people are willing to die on the hill? Or is it because it's a game of give and take, right? I mean, yeah, the double standards in terms of media representation is fucked. But on the Senate floor and on the House of Representatives floor, it's never been a game of standing your own ground and winning battles. That has never happened.
So what states would you focus on?
It's funny that we were talking about like West Virginia for like almost 80 years was almost solidly Democrats, and then you just made the comment that
please. I don't think I can handle any more bully pulpit Joe Manchin arguments. Okay, I just don't think I can handle them. Like physically and emotionally. Ezra
Klein made about like it's easier, like the actual quote is like it's easier to imagine the end of the world than like the end of capitalism or something like that. He's saying it's like easier to imagine like, you know, X crazy thing happening instead of Democrats having like these majorities and stuff like that. West Virginia is an example that has turned hard red. It's like now I think the second reddest state in the country, but it wasn't always like that. As a longer tradition of actually being blue and being filled with like Dixiecrats and stuff like that were pro-labor. And in 2016, Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary was able to win, I think, almost every single county over Clinton. And so his populist messaging and appeal to these, target or micro-targeting these voters that had been left behind by like, free trade agreements like NAFTA, by talking about strong unions or whatever, this was able to get a populist candidate who openly calls himself a democratic socialist to win in the primary specifically, right?
You think Bernie Sanders would have been competitive in West Virginia in 2016?
Yes, if he had secured the nominee, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
But he didn't.
West Virginia 2016 presidential election results. I just want to see what the margin is.
No, it's swung hard for Trump.
In 2024, I think it was like a 40-point margin. Results. Hold on, let me just look at this real quick. West Virginia.
My issue with Hutch is always that he's too nice. And by the way, this is not a compliment, okay? It's a critique. Okay? There are times in which you have to trade in your cloak for a sword, as Jesus likes to say. I don't fucking know, dude.
That was a 42-point margin. And you're saying that you think Bernie Sanders could have been competitive in West Virginia?
Because again, if he had gone on to become the candidate, because Clinton didn't do well in that particular state.
That's kind of astounding to me. Do you seriously think that he would have overperformed Hillary Clinton by a margin of like 30 or 40 points?
No, he did overperform Hillary Clinton. I think that, and then if he had won, he would have beaten Trump in that state. I believe it. Yeah. Because again, like you're looking at, it's only very, very recently that West Virginia has become this red. You know that, right?
Yeah, I'm aware that West Virginia was a blue state at times.
Yeah, not decades and decades and decades. It was mostly blue.
I mean, that's a pretty big claim what you're saying here. You're just casually saying that Bernie Sanders would have outperformed Hillary Clinton by a margin of at least 25 to 30 points to get a simple majority.
I don't know about that. I say he would have won. I think that he would have won that state.
Okay.
Is that Hutch?
Wait, Bernie Sanders would have won West Virginia?
The claim is just, if Bernie Sanders had advanced to the general, right, I think he could have gotten West Virginia. That's the only claim I'm making. I'm not saying he would have won with flying colors. But I'm saying I think he could have beat Donald Trump in 2016.
But I'm saying that's
this is a meaningless question. How do I skip this? How do I skip this? Hello? Yeah. Oh my! Why is my settings for XCOM like fucking? Why is it reset? Sorry. Let me reset my audio. My bad. Ugh. Okay.
Extraordinary. She got 26% of the vote. So you're saying that he would have ran at least 25
yeah,
points?
Yeah, but you would expect that because she didn't win in the primary at all. In the majority of the counties in West Virginia, those Dem voters, to the extent that they were still active at that time, rejected her.
Well,
she got horrible margins also with them.
Well, where's the evidence of this happening like elsewhere in the country? Like where else are you seeing, economically populist candidates do, or like really progressive, far left leaning candidates do like really well in deep red districts and states? Like where is this actually happening?
Where's the evidence that Ezra Klein that anti-choice Dems is going to help them win? Well, and that's what all of this starts back on. He doesn't have the evidence for that. He's just if we're being
shaken, not stirred.
Hutch wants to say you're a dumb moron, but he needs 2 more HRS of content.
Oh yeah, sure, fair enough. All right, thank you, Casey.
And he's only positing that as a hypothesis and a potential strategy or whatever.
Look, I love Hutch, okay?
He's got no numbers. All the opposite supports him. Arizona voters passed constitutional amendment guaranteeing abortion access. That was 2024. Missouri voters approve Amendment 3, overturn state's abortion ban. This is November 5th, 2024. Ohio the same, Kansas the same.
Right. I think his evidence is that the more moderate candidates in competitive districts have measurably, demonstrably done better than further left candidates. This is just like something that we have observed in the data over the last 4 elections.
Bro. Oh yeah, by the way, the question she's asking is the claim he's making is her claim is that Bernie could have won West Virginia if Bernie was like Joe Manchin. Yeah, no shit. Anyone could have won West Virginia if they are like Joe Manchin. Yeah, of course. It's a nonsensical question. If you're talking about Bernie's current agenda, then no. All right, I just don't think so. I think Bernie is way too far left for the people of West Virginia. All right. But if your question is, can Bernie win West Virginia? The answer is always yes. If Bernie was Joe Manchin, if Bernie adopted Joe Manchin's agenda, yes, completely. I think she meant for his current agenda. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
Cycles. And I don't think you can give me a single example of a far left candidate performing well in a deep red district or state. I just where is that?
I don't have it offhand. I'm sure I could like go and find it or whatever. But I mean, like looking at Zoran Mamdani, if I told you just a few months ago, did you know that a young Muslim, openly democratic socialist candidate who is not a staunch, like openly pro-Israel guy in New York City might end up becoming the mayor pretty soon? Would you have believed that?
Probably not. No. Yeah. But I mean, but New York, that's New York City. We're talking about West Virginia. You know,
I'm only talking about like you're like, that's crazy that you think Bernie could have won West Virginia in 2016. I really do think that if he had advanced to the general. But I'm telling you that like, yeah, unpredictable things can happen in U.S. electoral politics. We have historical trends, but you know, the history is not predetermined. You can't know for sure what's going to win. Like, and I'm just saying that you're like, that just seems crazy. Where are the examples of like, you know, these things? And I'm saying,
Oh, right. I remember the term that I gave for analysis like this. Hindsight Andy, right? Hindsight Andy is whenever you go back to the past and you predict and you look into the future from the past and said, oh yeah, Bernie could have won this. We could have won this and that election. If only we were more pro-Palestine, right? If only we were more pro-Palestine, if only we were more pro-X and Y, right? Oh, we could have won this election and that election. Well, you couldn't have known, right? You have the gift of hindsight. You have the gift of knowing what the future looks like and going back into the past. You have to work with the information that was present at that very moment. Okay. Yeah.
saying crazier things are happening currently, and you're seeing like a lot of success with them. So
New York City is a very different electorate than like, okay, so if I just like pull up the map on the screen,
Hutch, I know New York City is a very different electorate.
Well, you have to contend with that, right? Like you can't use Mamdani as an example and then say just do what Mamdani did, because like, do you think Mamdani?
People shouldn't be allowed to use AOC either. Okay, like where did she win? Plus 30 blue or something like that? Yeah, of course, she's gonna win there.
Like,
I'm not saying do what Mamdani did. I'm saying that.
What, like, where did Bernie win? Maine? Sorry, where was it? Yeah, was it Maine? Is that his home state? Oh, Vermont. No, Vermont. Like, yeah, that's extremely deep blue, I believe, right?
It's an example of a candidate that, against all odds, was able to succeed. So I'm saying that the unorthodox strategies, if we're just, broadening Ezra Klein's claim to, they need to be willing to embrace unorthodox like strategies to be able to win. Sometimes it might look like Zoran Mamdani, and you're already seeing people try to replicate the success of his campaign in their own ads. Other times it might look a lot more conservative, and it might look closer to just running as like a moderate, running closer to like a race like fucking Slotkin or Latimer, unfortunately.
Isn't that what Ezra Klein was getting to?
It's called red regions. Oh, okay.
He was getting at the same idea, just from a really kind of extreme application of that logic, right?
I stand corrected.
I took him at his word that both times when he just said they need to be open to running pro-choice candidates with no data on his side, that is the kind of the start and end of his argument. If we want to have a separate conversation about like a broader strategy, sure, but like now we're inserting things into Ezra Klein, like into his words that he just literally never said.
I think, would you disagree that I think what he was getting at was this idea that we used to have members of the Democratic Party coalition, like the party was not always this kind of like purity tested. And there were plenty of examples of not even like that. You don't even have to go that far back to see, like massive Democratic Party coalitions that included a very ideologically diverse.
It included racists. I know. It included segregationists. It included all sorts of different cohorts that were completely unsavory.
It really did. Yes. I mean, if you go back to FDR, for example, I mean, do you think that FDR should have like principally just pushed all the segregationists out of, do you think that would have been the correct decision for him at the time, was to just like kick all the segregationists out of the party?
No. Because there's a political reality for him to contend with, that the country is fucking racist. The country is filled with segregationists. Both parties have this, but you don't see that when it comes to reproductive rights, because when you're contending with an electorate like that, it's not even in the conversation. Like, are we gonna or the conversation is still burgeoning.
Wait, so if you were to contend with other people making political calculations, why can't you contend with anything that you've said prior?
Are we going to introduce civil rights reform? Are we going to discontinue segregation? Is there going to be Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera? Like, that's a conversation in the same way that trans rights is still burgeoning, right? That is advancing, but the electorate's where they're at on that, right? So you have to contend with that. As opposed to reproductive rights, where it's like, no, the conversation has advanced past that. You don't see a large swath of Democrats that are pro-choice when you pull them, or that are anti-choice when you pull them, right?
It's like, I think around like 30% of Democrats. I'm not really sure.
So it's like not even a plurality, because if it were 33, then you could at least say it was a plurality.
I might be
30% of Democrats.
It
sounds like it might be a low priority for them, or if they're identifying that way, is it like Biden, where like Biden says he's personally anti-choice, but then as far as his political decisions, he acts like he's pro-choice? Because that could be where those Dems are coming from. And then we don't even know, is it a priority? Because what Ezra is talking about is trying to, I thought, get Republican voters. that this is a wedge issue for them. They're almost single issue voters, and it's important.
If we just like steelman Ezra Klein's, or maybe not even steelman it, but like, let's just say for the sake of a hypothetical, because I'm just curious to hear what your answer would be. Let's say Ezra Klein's strategy, like we could demonstrate that it would work. I'm not saying that we can, and I'm not saying that, I don't even know if what Ezra is saying is based on any kind of data. He could just be going off of his gut. I'm not really sure. But let's say there is validity to the strategy, and you could net like a not insignificant amount of seats in the House and the Senate if you were to throw institutional support behind anti-choice candidates in really red states and districts where that position might be the difference between winning and losing. And let's say after you build a coalition by doing that, you were able to pass single-payer healthcare. Do you think that would be a strategy that you would support?
Yeah. In the universe where the world is made of jello, and also these options are on the table, yes, I would support that. But I don't think that's the world we live in. If that were the case, if that were the reality, if that were the paradigm, it would be less controversial what he said, and I would be more willing to hear him out, because we would have to be contending with the fact that just so much of the American population is not where I want them to be on reproductive rights, and there's still a lot of work to be done to win hearts and minds and to win people over to being open to expanding reproductive rights. But it seems like this is almost like open and shut among the electorate, and now it's just a matter of getting the law to reflect where Americans are at on it, because now the law is not actually in line with where the majority of independents, Republicans, and Democrats are on this issue. So I don't want to put candidates forward that are going to erode those even more than they already have been.
So your issue is not so much with the strategy itself. You're saying the strategy is not viable because you see the issue of abortion as being just like a pure winner for Democrats across the board, like in every state and every district, that kind of thing?
I don't know about every district, but at least at the state level, when it was put to a referendum in 2022, 2023, 2024, voters overwhelmingly, and like 60% of voters going to say, we are rejecting a statewide abortion ban. And in some cases, we want to actually enshrine abortion rights in our state constitution, even in red states, which is very, very impressive to me. And if anything, it's an argument that Republicans should be more open to running the pro-choice candidates, because that's...
Do religious Democrats just not exist now?
closer to where the electorate is at than Democrats being open to backsliding on this issue and running anti-choice candidates.
Maybe you might be right.
Because the data's on our side with that one, don't you think?
You might be right about that for sure. And
I can think of one person. It's Suzanne Collins, right? Is a Republican who's like, she says she's pro-choice.
I think Susan. Well, I don't know if she's pro-choice, but she was pro like Roe v. Wade. I think.
Yeah, something like that.
14% of Democrats in 2024 say that abortion should always be illegal in all or most cases. 14%. These are the people who are absolutist on abortion. So 14% in 2024. So where that 14% is concentrated, I believe, is important. I just don't know how many of that is, found in West Virginia, I guess. Yeah.
But like, they say she runs that way, but then what does she do? She gets into office and then she votes to confirm anti-choice Supreme Court judges and justices. So to me, it's like you ran on that.
I think she voted against Kavanaugh and maybe Amy Coney Barrett as well.
Let me see.
Did she vote for all of his nominees?
Collins, even if she voted for just one, vote for Trump's Supreme Court picks. But basically, as far as I know, she paid lip service to and like signals that like I'm more pro-choice or I'm more moderate when it comes to abortion. But then when you see the way that she votes, it's so much closer to an anti-choice agenda than it is to a pro-choice agenda. So if the other argument could be that Democrats should lie to people, signal that they're anti-choice, but then when they get in office, vote pro-choice, then it really is an aesthetic thing at that point. And I'm like, we can I guess talk about the ethics of like duping people to get into office and then voting against what you said you'd run on. I think.
Well, the key here is that people pay more attention to you when you're on your campaign trail than they pay attention to you when you vote on a bill. That's the reality. People only pay attention to bills. People only pay attention to bills when an opponent during an election points out that their opponent has voted on X and Y, and that's why I oppose them, right? But typically, you might be a little bit more hesitant to say what you could on a campaign trail because more eyes are on you. So a lot of people will be hesitant, especially in regions where it is way more red, right? I think that's not I don't think that should be a controversial opinion, right? It's campaign strategy. What the fuck does anti-choice mean? I'm assuming that is pro-life. I think that she is saying that because she believes in like the messaging changing in the sense that, because I've heard it before, you want like instead of pro-life, she wants to frame it in a more negative way. So she wants to describe it as anti whatever the fuck, anti-choice, right?
That's principally wrong. But as far as what's good for me, I want to see reproductive rights enshrined. So if they did that, you wouldn't hear a complaint from me because I think people need to get on board with reproductive rights.
But if I could, hypothetically, because I just want to know like principally where you're at, because it sounds like you're not as inflexible as a lot of other people who really do believe in like the purity testing. Like the type of candidates that we run have to meet like a very certain minimum standard across like a myriad issues. But it sounds like you're more flexible on it. Because like if I, for example, if I could show you data to suggest that we could actually expand the races that we would be competitive in by like 25 or 30 races if we ran like a pro-life candidate in those districts or states, it sounds like you might be open to that. Because a moment ago you said that you would be okay with that kind of a coalition if it meant single payer, right?
If it meant single payer, and at that point, again, I think that just speaks to the fact that most of it, like, it's like for people to be, for Democratic activists to be demanding this purity test across all 50 states for an issue that's clearly not settled among the American public, that to me is like wish casting. I'm like, you don't have the numbers to be demanding this sort of purity test just yet, right? As opposed to, but like, we do have the numbers with this. That's why it's strange to me. So yes, to answer your question, yes, if there was a large cohort of anti-choice but pro-single payer Democrats, which I can't even imagine, but if that existed, I would work with them to pass single payer and then never let up the fight for reproductive rights. You just do it at the same time and keep pushing, et cetera, until you're able to codify Roe v. Wade, like win these back, right? But that to me is like, it's such a different, it's hard to even imagine this political reality. That's like saying like, what if we dropped same-sex, like marriage equality, but we get Medicare for all? I'm like, maybe. I can't even imagine this though. I can't imagine where these people are that want, like the Democratic voters specifically, that are anti-marriage equality, but are pro-Medicare for all. Where are these people? That sounds like an independent. It sounds like a Republican that could be flipped, or it sounds like a non-voter that has like, is a black box as far as like trying to figure out what's going to be the one issue that motivates them to get to.
You know, what else is a black box? Cherries. Okay, sorry. Pause.
The polls and vote for them.
So Arkansas, for example, I think has a majority oppose abortion. Like 57% of Arkansas apparently thinks that abortion should always be illegal compared to 41%. That's according to a Pew Research poll. And I have to assume that there would be other states as well. I mean, I agree with you that the issue overall is one of the strengths of the Democratic Party right now. And it showed up in really unconventional ways. But like when we look at, I think like Ohio and Missouri, like these are like R plus, 8 to 12 states, as opposed to Arkansas, which is like a R plus, 20 or 30 or whatever it is. And I think you could probably find other states that are deep red that are anti-choice, that are pro like banning abortion. So theoretically, I feel like you could probably find a lot of opportunities to run as an anti-choice candidate where it would increase your odds of success. I don't know. It's all very abstract.
The anti-choice candidate that votes for single payer. Like, I want to meet this candidate. Who are they? Because it just sounds like a unicorn candidate in a unicorn district that doesn't exist. But if you could find me districts where like you keep seeing at these really local races, these kind of like heterodox or ideologically idiosyncratic Democrats that are like pro Second Amendment, they're anti-choice, but they're also very pro-union and they're pro Medicare for all. And they are like this kind of weird mishmash or whatever, and they're succeeding and they're winning. I would hear Ezra Klein out, but he didn't have a single example. I don't think did he ever at any point in the conversation with Ross Douthat and Ta-Nehisi Coates point to a specific candidate that did this and was met with success? I think maybe he said one. It was a guy, but I wasn't sure.
Was it not?
I thought he was a Republican.
I'm not sure.
No, it wasn't Cuellar. It was somebody else who's been elected in the last couple of years. I'll have to like go through it.
I don't know.
And really quick, so Susan Collins voted to confirm Gorsuch. And then she voted she provided a crucial yes vote for Kavanaugh's confirmation, but she was the only Republican to vote against Barrett's confirmation.
Gotcha. Okay. I knew it was at least one of them. I don't know. I think you're kind of underselling a little bit the idea that there could be people that are religiously conservative but would be open to a program like single payer, some kind of like massive reform of healthcare, some kind of like expansion of the welfare state. That does seem to be becoming a lot more common these days, where you have people that are socially conservative, but
like the 30 Rock meme.
Yeah, we've been talking about that, but like that's becoming a thing, like for sure. And so, I mean, I don't think I'm qualified to to break down each issue and sort of tell you like which issue would be stronger in which state. I'll leave that up to the pollsters that are much more data driven and they get more granular with the.
We haven't even established whether or not Straighterade even cares about the Democratic Party outside of voting for Kamala Harris, which is like the bare minimum. I guess I just don't really see the point of this conversation.
With the data, but the idea itself, like I appreciate it at the very least Ezra Klein for having this conversation so publicly and actually like provoking a larger conversation about how we see coalitions in the left-wing movement in this country, just like the broad left-wing movement. I mean, I don't think even you would deny, right, that like we have moved towards a much more kind of, like there's a much more kind of strictly enforced orthodoxy, I think. That just wasn't really the case for, decades. Us not having that kind of orthodoxy was the reason why stuff like Social Security and Medicare were signed into law in the first place. You had a situation where back then, like the Communist Party in the United States endorsed FDR when FDR was very outspoken against socialism and communism. Like his whole thing.
Yeah, he did the New Deal to save capitalism.
Right. Yeah, that was his exact express purpose. I mean, and then you had civil rights leaders, Black Americans who were living under Jim Crow still, who endorsed FDR, even though he was on the record against anti-lynching legislation because he knew it would alienate Southern segregationists. So,
well, I take Ta-Nehisi's position on that because he says if that's what a politician has to do to be able to get their legislative agenda done, then I can understand that and I can accept that. But is it my responsibility as a journalist, as a voter, as a Black American to not criticize that decision at that?
Are you Black? Sorry, this is not meant as a disrespect. Are you Black?
Time from if I'm somebody living in FDR's America, I think not. He said, I think it's my job to continue to push the needle on that and to continue the fight for this and to not.
She looks Latino. That's not the same.
Be praising them for this because that is not, they did all of those things in spite while being met with opposition, because I know he must have had support simultaneously from these pro-segregation Dixiecrats, Democrats or whatever, and simultaneously he was probably also met with a lot of outspoken opposition from people who generally
She's saying what would a Black person be asking themselves? Oh, okay.
Supported him but thought he was dead wrong when it came to civil rights and that he wasn't going far enough when it came to being segregation.
But the coalition held. I mean, it was a very strong coalition, and the fact of the matter is like I feel like the Democratic Party gets a lot of grief from I hear from like the far left because I feel like they're not big
from me.
People like you, like they're people. The big criticism that I hear the most from you guys is that they don't do enough with power when they have the power. And I think that this is a very, and very oftentimes people like Obama are compared to like, well, why didn't he do what LBJ did? And why didn't he do what FDR did? The fact of the matter is like, racist Dixiecrats and segregationists were an essential part of the Democratic coalition for decades. And like, that was the reason why they had a big enough mandate to actually pursue these enormous, like bold policy agendas. And that coalition collapsed over the course of like a few decades. And with the implementation of the Southern Strategy and the Dixiecrats becoming disillusioned with LBJ after he pursued civil rights. And we've never been able to rebuild that coalition. I mean, the fact that we got a 60 vote threshold in 2009 was just as much a product of the financial collapse as it was Obama being a generationally skilled orator. I mean, the fact is like you can build huge majorities if the fucking economy is about to like completely unravel. And, like it really would have been catastrophic. Yeah. But there's more opportunity there. And so like, I just don't really hear a coherent vision for how to rebuild that coalition unless we're necessarily talking about meeting voters where they're at in red states and being okay with that, not chasing these people out of the party.
Okay, so that's the thing. We're meeting voters where we're at. We're like assuming that there's like a fixed number of voters and there's not enough of a strategy that's geared towards trying to bring more people into the party. Because I realize it's mostly older people that vote, unfortunately. I realize that's the case, but old people are not going to be around forever. And the Democrats need to have a base.
Yeah, that's an issue. You're right. That is an issue. But that has nothing to do. But the issue is that has nothing to do with what Hutch is talking about here, right? Does that make sense? Like there is an issue. There is an issue with Democrats creating new Democrats. Absolutely. Charlie Kirk was extremely successful. okay, in getting younger men to vote Republican. All right, these people are vying for political power, and they're extremely successful at it. Meanwhile, the Democrats have been, I will admit, lacking in that respect. However, what I fail to see is how does Straighterade rhetoric get us closer to Democrats making new Democrats? If younger people want the party to cater, then they need to get their asses and vote to show the party they're a reliable demographic to cater to. Exactly. But I don't think that'll ever happen, right? I don't know. It's like women don't really, I feel like women don't really care about politics until they're like 30. I don't fucking know. I don't know. And young men especially don't care about politics. I need to, you know what? I need to stop pulling shit out of my ass. Okay? I need to start looking up stats. Hold on.
Of new voters that they foster and they get registered to vote. Like you see, when you look across the aisle, you see young Republicans, right? Do we have like young Democrats? Do we have them? Do we have the establishment doing the youth voter outreach in a way that's actually reaching them? To make sure that you are effectively grooming the next generation of voters to inherit the party. And what I see is not only Democrats clinging to older candidates, when if we didn't learn that lesson in the hardest way possible in 2024, I don't know what to tell the establishment Dems that they keep pushing forward like older Democrats that I realize have good poll numbers and they have high favorability and they may even have a good chance to win. But at what point do we start saying like, no, we really need to start introducing some younger candidates into this party because we need to not have people die in office. We need to have people be confident that like they're voting for like healthy candidates for one. And we need to, I think, expand ground game when it comes to building out things kind of like left TPUSA, basically, right? I think it's overstated the extent to which TPUSA was actually reaching like younger people, because when you looked at like how like I saw like a YouGov poll that came out recently asking like Zoomers and millennials their opinions on Charlie Kirk, and for millennials it was
interesting. Look, but this is the amount of register voters. This doesn't account for people who don't care about voting in general. I feel like so like this is already including people, because people who lean Democrat, all right, 18 to 24, all right, which is extremely young people, is a plus 32 and a 64 to 32. But the problem here is that it's not taking into account people who are nihilistic about voting or nihilistic about nihilistic about things. Like this is not that useful to me, but I'll keep on looking. I'll keep searching the numbers.
Rapid for Zoomers, it was like negative. It was awesome when it came to older people, but I was like, I don't know, like
it was 30.
It was 30%.
It was I think it was 30%. I think of college students that were polled had a positive opinion of Charlie Kirk, and 70% that had a negative opinion. I don't know what those numbers look like for kids that are in like the trades, not in college.
But if that 30% was all registered to vote for Republicans because of TPUSA, then at that point it almost doesn't matter that it's not even a plurality, because it's like, well, holy shit, he's funneled them from his org to the party. Now they're voting. Now they're exerting political power, and they can win.
I don't think we saw a surge in turnout for the youth vote, though. I think that the reason why the parties don't focus a lot of their resources and time on young people is just they just don't vote in large enough numbers to justify that kind of budget when you could be spending that money on, swing state voters. But that brings it to my point. We need to bring them in. We need to do the work of it. It's not going to happen from one election cycle to the next. It is going to be very, very slow. And you want, like, at some point it seems like people start to vote. like people do start, like, part of the young people or whatever at some point, even if it's less than 50%, do eventually realize I need to start voting for the president. Like, this stuff impacts me. It's my civic duty. Whatever the reason is, maybe when they have a family, they eventually vote. And when they get to that point, if you've laid the groundwork in their like early 20s or whatever, then at the point where they finally vote when they're 33, at least they're going to be a Democratic voter. And it's going to be so hard to capture that in a poll or in data that's not like this longitudinal study following a very specific cohort of people that went from being non-voters to eventually voting for Democrats, and to like be able to like truly link it back to a democratic institution or org or grassroots effort. But I do think that they need to.
Oh, it's actually higher than I thought, but still not high enough, I guess. Youth voter turnout in the past 3 presidential elections. We have 47% in 2024, 50% in 2020, and 39% in 2016, which is yikes. Okay. Yeah, that's yikes. Oh, white woman. White women are pretty important in young turnout, whatever the fuck. 18 to 24, right? State by state turnout for youth turnout, we have a map. And it looks like for the map, for California youth turnout, it's but the state that matters, right? West Virginia, she said. West Virginia. Where is West Virginia? Nobody knows where the fuck the state is. Okay, it's not a real state. There's no way it's a real state, right? Okay, West Virginia. You can see you can see that the voter turnout is 39% max. 39% max. Which is not good. Which is not good. All right, compared to the total turnout of 50 something percent. Okay? Which is still not good. But comparatively, it's not good. Okay? The highest is Vermont. Yeah. The way Foodshops says women is crazy, but I love it. I don't get it. Yeah. No. There's nothing you can do there. I'm sorry.
Take the chance and assume that if they do things that are like tried to like deep canvassing, tried and true ways of like having personal conversations with people, with young people, in areas that they need to like, you know, win some ground back from Republicans or that are purple and they could flip blue. I think that that's what Democrats should be investing in for all candidates, but especially for young people, because they need to bring it.
I'll give you an additional reason why young people don't care about voting. It's because they're healthy. That's why. Okay, people care about voting when their own fucking body begins to deteriorate and signs of aging begin to show. Then they begin caring about healthcare.
Non-voters, I think that's who they need to really focus.
I'm guessing younger women care about healthcare a lot more, which is why they try to vote like a lot sooner than, you know, men. Just mainly because, okay, young women have to worry about abortion. That's why.
On.
Yeah, I don't even know if I necessarily disagree with that kind of strategy. It just depends on like how much of the resources that you have are you allocating to that kind of stuff. I'm not really qualified to say what the percentages should be, but I think like I don't know. Going back to the point, I just feel like there is a lot of strong evidence to suggest that candidates who more meet the general population where they're at are typically the ones that do better in elections. Like this is just a measurable trend. And I hear this theory floated a lot from the people that are like to my left that I have conversations with, that if you send Bernie Sanders into West Virginia, for example, you're not even the first person that I've heard suggest that we can possibly flip West Virginia blue if we just deploy, you know, people like Sanders to go in there and run on these economically populist sort of agendas. There just really isn't a lot of evidence that that's true right now. And
you just said that you're seeing this trend of socially conservative, economically liberal people.
No, but like that would be in service of Ezra Klein's theory, right? Like I would not bristle at the idea of pro-choice Democrat.
I thought you were saying that if you're just repeating what he said. Okay, I thought you were saying that you're increasingly seeing this emerge as like where the average median voter is at.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't say socially conservative. I'd probably say socially moderate.
Well, let me just ask you, like, why do you think the Bernie wing, the sort of like the Pramila Jayapal wing of the Democratic Party, why do you think they've been kind of stagnant over the last like 6 or 7 years? I mean, there was kind of I think a big.
Wait, hold on, I'm sorry. Is this assuming that Bernie Sanders have always been a West Virginian? Because I feel like that's also a factor to play into people's votes, right? Because they care about whether or not their candidate actually came from the state like they are from, right? Like nobody is going to accept, like I feel like whenever candidates run, it's because they're constantly talking about the state in which they grew up in. Like that's a huge reason why people vote, I'm guessing. I feel like that's a huge reason. Why normies do that? But like I just don't quite get like because otherwise you can make an argument that like, oh yeah, this fucking infiltrator is trying to ruin shit. But yeah. Fixed stream screen, I got you. Yep.
Surge in 2018 and it's kind of leveled off. So like what if this kind of like Graham Plattner kind of platform is so popular, if the Bernie kind of platform is as popular as progressives seems to think, like I hear it a lot, there's just this massive silent majority of Americans that secretly are just like yearning for things like Medicare for all. And
no, I've never thought that. I've never thought that's like Cenk's thing. Cenk is like, basically everybody is a progressive already. They just don't know it.
Okay.
And I'm like, I just don't see this, Cenk. You're like, I don't think he's crazy. I think it's almost like aspirational.
Right.
Like he it's like a fake it till you make it type thing. Like if he says that enough, that will be true. And unfortunately, that's just not true. Like at best, I think people overestimate how conservative the electorate is. And so that him pushing back against that can be useful. And I think there are different points where economically you would be surprised to learn that voters in deep red states and districts do actually have contempt for the wealthy. They don't think billionaires pay their fair share or whatever. But, you know, ask that grandma about immigrants, ask them about trans people, ask them about reproductive rights. It's going to be really, really bad answers as far as what like most progressives want to hear, right? Like maybe they're on board with the economic populism, nothing else.
Doesn't that justify Ezra Klein's proposal though? If you're saying that well, you're gonna have to explain that to me.
Because
I don't understand that logic, because if you're saying that these people, you know, progressives would be surprised at how many people like that are in the country, doesn't that lend credence to what he's saying? Because like if that's true, if I take you at your word, then why wouldn't we want to run candidates in those districts and states that are more in line with that kind of social conservatism?
I can explain. This is what I told you in 2016. Bernie Sanders is. Would you say that Bernie Sanders is progressive on social issues in the same way that like Kamala Harris, AOC, or even just any like random like Elizabeth Warren, just any random Democrat that you select, right? I know I just picked progressives and some like moderates or whatever, but he's progressive on social issues generally, right?
Bernie, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but like in 2016, he's able to in the Democratic primaries in West Virginia, he's able to win all of these municipalities and districts across the state over Clinton. And so even if he was winning over Dem voters who might have personally,
but that's versus Clinton. You would have to see Bernie versus someone like Joe Manchin, right? Like you're telling me that the West Virginians would choose Bernie over Joe Manchin? Because the problem you have is Joe Manchin. You don't. That's over Hillary. Even if that's true, I don't even know if it's true.
Been anti-choice, but in that moment they were.
Yeah, and Clinton is also a woman who is pro-choice. You sure that supports your argument? Like, are you thinking about it a little bit more, or are we just like brain dead? I don't know.
Prioritizing the economic agenda over their preference for conservative social policy, right? And I think that's the important thing to activate, because what the critical error that's being made is assuming that because you have these voters that are anti-choice, that means it's a top priority when they head into the voting booth, and that's not been borne out to me.
But your whole thing here is that you seem to suggest that Bernie Sanders would have beat Donald Trump in West Virginia in 202016. I don't know what that's based on.
In that state, yeah.
I mean, I genuinely have no idea what that's based on.
Because he's a true left populist, and when you look at the rhetoric that Trump ran on in 2016, obviously it's reactionary. He's running on like a fucking Muslim ban. But you have to remember what else did he run on in 2016?
Well, he was like, his main thing was Medicare for all. That was for sure the central pillar of his
Trump.
Oh, Trump.
In 2016.
He was running on undoing NAFTA. He was running on, you know, appointing pro-life justices. He was running on anti-immigration. You know, like he had like five
Native
or six
sentiments.
He had like 5 or 6 things. But it was like mostly he was like talking about like the unfair trade deals, getting rid of Obamacare,
repeal and replace Obamacare,
exactly.
build the wall, like these sorts of things. But we would call that like maybe it's vulgar, but like a right-wing populism was emerging, right?
Yeah. But
like at least rhetorically, obviously, we know once he gets into office, the way that he governs is no different than any other Republican, which anybody could have guessed. But as far as the pitch that landed with voters in that state, it was he seems socially conservative.
No, he doesn't govern like other Republicans by far. But okay, like I would prefer George Bush over. Is she talking about Trump? She's talking about Trump,
and
right?
Economically populist, and he's anti-free trade.
Deals, getting rid of Obamacare.
Because he's a true left populist.
You seem to suggest that Bernie Sanders would have beat Donald Trump in West Virginia in 2016. I don't know what that's based on.
In that state, yeah.
I mean, I genuinely.
How is Trump anywhere close to George Bush? At least neocons like George Bush is pretending that they respect the Constitution. At least they're pretending they respect the Constitution. What? Okay.
genuinely have no idea what that's based on.
Because
There's
he's a
just
true
no-
left populist. And when you look at the rhetoric that that Trump ran on in 2016, obviously it's reactionary. He's running on like a fucking Muslim ban. But you have to remember what else did he run on in 2016?
Well, he was
Like-
his main thing was Medicare for all. That was for sure the central pillar.
No,
of his
Trump.
entire-
Trump.
Oh, Trump.
In 2016. What
Trump was
he
running
run
on. He was running on undoing NAFTA. He was running on appointing pro-life justices. He was running on
Yeah, but they don't give a fuck about that. Trump, like, they didn't vote Trump based off of his fucking policies. They voted Trump because he had good vibes. All right.
He was running on
And that-
anti-immigration. Like he had like 5 or
native
6 like,
sentiments.
yeah.
And that's how the indoctrination began, right?
Yeah, he had like
Sorry.
5 or 6 things, but it was like mostly he was like talking about like unfair trade deals, getting rid of Obamacare,
Repeal and replace Obamacare, build the
exactly.
wall,
Yeah.
like these sorts of things. But we would call that like maybe it's vulgar, but like a right-wing populism was emerging, right?
Yeah. But
Like at least rhetorically. Obviously, we know once he gets into office, the way that he governs is no different than any other Republican, which anybody could have guessed. But as far as the pitch that landed with voters in that state, it was he seems socially conservative and economically populist, and he's anti-free trade, and he's going to bring the jobs back, right? He would always talk about we're going to bring back manufacturing. He's there putting on hard hats and going to talk to like labor unions and Teamsters and shit, and making overtures to reach out to candidates or to voters that had been disillusioned, disaffected, and left behind because they're just stopped being Democrats that even bothered because they're like it's a red area. We don't seem like we're ever going to win these people over, so they just stopped entirely. And I think Bernie came in, and even with his socially progressive values, the fact that he's championing and speaking to these voters that have been left behind, talking about like, I know you're heard about the like free trade deals like NAFTA that left you behind, manufacturing's gone, unions been gutted. Like he won those voters back in the primary, and I don't see it. That's my reason for in the general. I think he would have been the answer to Trump's nativist right wing populism, which to me is just fascism.
It all seems very kind of fantastical. Is that the word? This idea
it's a hypothetical, but you told me that there's the hypothetical that you laid out was so specific, Hutch, of the anti-choice pro single payer Democrats that start popping up and start winning or whatever, and then you asked me at that point would I support it? It's like, yeah, I'd support it, but where is that? So we're both in fantasy land here, okay? Give me some leeway.
I'm not predicting that that's where the party needs to go. Be like anti-choice but pro.
No, you're just posing this insane hypothetical for me to answer and say if that were the case, answer it. So to me, we're doing counterfactuals. I'm doing counterfactual. You're doing a crazy hypothetical.
But the purpose of that question is to get to whether or not. So you say you disagree with Ezra Klein. Is that purely based on strategy or is it based on principle? And by answering that question, you told me you're not opposed to the principle of expanding the coalition to include unconventional people. It's the application. You don't think it actually is a valid strategy because you don't think that's where the electorate is at. I think those are that's a really meaningful difference. But I think your attitude of being open to that kind of unconventional coalition is exceedingly rare in left-wing spaces. Like, I don't think
probably. Unfortunately, in some, I'm not going to say all, I'm not going to throw all of my fellow lefties under the bus, but I think that like what you see with this, like what you're calling purity testing or whatever, is a frustration with the Democratic establishment compromising. It's funny that you're talking about purity testing because I feel like, there are some issues where it's like a Dem would be pretty much a non-starter candidate if they tried to like run on certain issues that weren't in alignment with the Democratic platform. And that's good, right? Like seeing like
This what happens to the brain when all the elections you could vote in, Trump was an option. True. Was she coached by Pisco? Mm-hmm. I think Hutch needs to start pushing back hard.
like, here's an example, like in 2019, 2020, when they're doing the Democratic primary debates,
like enough time has passed.
what I saw was a shift left to the left and a more progressive shift that I felt like every single candidate from Warren to Tulsi to Kamala to Biden, they were all kind of giving like a watered down version and pitch of Bernie's 2016 platform. No?
A lot of them were definitely taking notes. I mean, he obviously influenced the party direction at that time. Even though
they're all feeling like we need to have an answer that talks about expanding Obamacare, and you can't just say more Obamacare. You have to talk about like a public option. You have to talk about Medicare for all who want it. Like they were Pete Buttigieg like coming up with these like spins on it, right? And
I mean, Pete's model was
minimum
wage.
wage.
Pete's model was just like what Canada does, right? Like Pete's model of Medicare for all, like an opt-in kind of thing. That is the standard for developed countries that have socialized healthcare. Like Bernie's standard is well to the left of what basically every developed country does. Like he wanted to get rid of private insurance. And Pete was saying, like, what was wrong with that? What was wrong with what Pete said? Like, that seems kind of crazy.
I think that you shouldn't.
Because getting rid of your, like, voting to get rid of your insurance, like to get rid of supplemental insurance altogether, that does not pull well at all. Like, people are broadly opposed to that. So, to me,
I don't even know if I'm for that. I like my private, like I liked it when I had private insurance. When I had private insurance, I actually liked it. Like, I'm not even sure if I'm for that, right?
Like, I felt like his proposal was totally reasonable and completely in line with like most European countries and Canada. Like, that's just
It also
that's
comes
crazy.
down to the fact that like people don't vote solely off of policy. It's like a mixed mash of like there's also charisma and there's also like do you have a feel like your age, experience? Like Pete also couldn't get off the ground because what was Pete's prior experience other than being a veteran? You were the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, dude. There's more people in my apartment complex than there are in South Bend, Indiana. So like I thought he did that to kind of build his national presence, but he knew that he didn't have a chance of being competitive, even if he had the bestest platform, because he just didn't. He was just too young and too inexperienced to reach a lot of Dem voters at that point.
Well, let's rewind a little bit because like you said something I think that was kind of telling a moment ago, where you said that you said that a big part of the problem or big criticism that Democrats have is that they're perceived of compromising too much. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like in the example I was going to bring up was immigration. I think Democrats, after like they saw in 2016 Trump with his Muslim ban, the Muslim travel ban, and build the wall, and championing like nationalism, nativism, talking about making America great again. It's like, dude, what time are you talking about? Like, you know, I think at best they're talking about like this kind of mythical version of like Reagan's America that I'm sure was fabulous for some white people and just ignoring everybody else's average experience in America, right? But at worst, they're talking about a return to a time where there was a lot more social inequality between races, the sexes, different people of different sexualities and religions. So like the answer to that from Democrats was being, we are pro-immigrant and being outspoken about that, and we're going to defend immigrant rights, and we're skeptical of ICE and blah, blah, blah. And then they moved so far right on that, that they totally compromised.
I'll give up Kaiser. I also have Kaiser. Can confirm it's brilliant. Because of how much information is being shared, you don't... One of the biggest troubles, I believe, of Primera or of Blue Cross Blue Shield Anthem or whatever the fuck, is that you have to constantly exchange information between different doctors. I'm not saying a public option doesn't do that. I'm sure a public option can also do that, right? But like, they can also build a similar network like Kaiser, right? But like, by the way, okay, for public option, I feel like isn't the only way to change like disease qualifications and diagnoses and illnesses through legislation? Like for places that have public option and only public option or something like that, or public option as a choice or something, right? Does that, like, don't you have to pass laws in order to change that? But for private insurance, they can change it based off of insurance competition, because different insurances are competing with one another to maximize customers while trying to minimize customers trying to take advantage of the insurance for their own gain, right? Like prevent cheating insurance or something like that. Like I thought that was the part of the competition in capitalism that we want. They could make an official council of professionals to handle it. Yeah, but I feel like even that could be left up to legislation, right? I don't know.
And now that's an example of where you actually do see some ideological diversity in the party still, where you have Democrats that are more outspoken about being kind of like pro-immigrant and pathway to citizenship, and I support DACA and I support the Dreamers. And then you have other Democrats that are like, we need to secure the border. I'm against illegal immigration. I'm fine with deportations, just has to be done the right way. Is that not like a massive split in the party? Like, you don't see complete alignment on this issue. They've only shifted right.
Well, so first of all, like the border is one issue within the total umbrella of immigration. When you look at Biden's track record on immigration, he was just...
Bro, could you imagine the government trying to pass legislation to recognize gender dysphoria as a diagnosable illness that will actually allow medication and allow surgery? Can you imagine trying to pass legislation for that? Bro, that is a nightmare. That's a fucking nightmare, isn't it? Because it's such a contentious issue right now. How the fuck would you ever convince the populace to vote, especially vote for passing something that has been so fear-mongered, right? I don't know. Original ACA had a buy-in public option at age 55. Okay. Only issue with single payer that I know is that you lose any market force benefit of optimizing premium prices. Yeah. Sure.
Objectively, the most pro-immigrant president
cooked, yeah,
since like Reagan's amnesty in the 80s. You know, he naturalized like twice as many people. He issued way more visas. He, kept the DACA protections in place and reinstituted them after Donald Trump had gotten rid of them. His administration focused on deporting like people that.
Like, for example, I've heard people describe before that the UK is a welfare state, right? Even if it is a welfare state, doesn't it take like years on the fucking trans waiting list to get through just because of the politics of the matter? Like, doesn't it take years in like the Netherlands or something, or any one of these European countries that is only public option to get anywhere? I just don't think people are okay with waiting years. Like, that's crazy to me. Years long waiting lists. You're okay with that? Yeah, like this is why I'm kind of leaning towards multi-choice option. Like you can choose a public or a private choice, which is good. That's what California has. Guess what? That's what California has. Okay? The public choice is CalCare, and the private choice is if you are working for a company that offers a healthcare option, or you can pay for it yourself, all right, at a great cost. Okay? But if you can't afford the cost, just go with the public option. It's fucking based.
Were convicted of violent crimes. But a
couple of things that he still swung like more right on. I think the examples like after COVID, he kept in place like a travel ban that like Trump had instituted that he didn't need to continue, but he fought to continue. And then eventually like the court said you can't do that and he dropped it. And then another thing is he goes on to shut down the border, right? And the Supreme Court's like, you can't do that.
When you look at the amount of border encounters that were happening by month on his watch, it was a level of influx that no president in modern history has ever faced. Not even Donald Trump. Like at Donald Trump's peak in terms of how many like massive amounts of people showing up at the border, he was like a quarter of what Biden was dealing with at his peak, and that was sustained for like several months. And what happened was that it wasn't just the Republicans that were getting calls from their constituents to take action on the border. It was Democratic Party constituents calling their senators and asking them to take action. I don't think anybody.
Wait, European countries don't have a private choice? Some of them, actually, a lot of them don't have private choice. I'm pretty sure, right? It's pretty fucked, I thought.
We would disagree that what was happening at the border was completely untenable. You know, you can be super pro immigration and still look at the situation at the border and think like this is just not sustainable.
Yeah, to me, the solution is not let's do an executive order to shut it down. The solution is you reignite the conversation.
Yes, most European countries have private healthcare options, even though they are known for their universal public systems. These private options can include private health insurance companies, sometimes with government subsidies and the ability for some high earners. Yeah, but it's like high earners, I feel like, okay, to opt out of the public system for private insurance. Private care typically offers faster access to specialists and reduced wait times. Way faster. It's not even close. Like I think it's faster, but it's like it's like way faster. No, it's like way faster. It's not even close. It's not even close. Like for private healthcare, you can literally get one. Like fucking, you can get an appointment next week, if you could, depending on where you live. For gender affirming care, and get the medication instantly as well.
About you guys, this is why we need a pathway to citizenship. This is why we need to overhaul
all of these.
It's not related. It's different, but it's not unrelated.
No, but
the reason why you have this influx of all these people and they're all getting concentrated and like there's a bunch of kids in cages again. Hutch, I'm not going off the point. Let me finish and then you can jump in, okay?
But you keep interrupting me here. Like the simple fact of the matter is that the
because you understand my point.
No, I think I understand your point here, but I'm saying that you're saying that in response to like 800,000 people a month showing up at the border, Biden should have gone up there and said we need to do a pathway to citizenship. Like how would that have helped the border? Like, what would you have done about the border?
That's like, when Democrats have to actually do the work of explaining how these two things are related, which I was trying to do to you, and then you.
By the way, there are most definitely flaws with a public option, even in California, even though it's pretty damn good. Like, for example, if you, like, I'm prescribed Vyvanse, okay? I buy Vyvanse. I get Vyvanse for free from California based off of CalCare. It's fucking nice. However, the thing is that if they run out of stock, which they do extremely often, they can't give me the generic version. Apparently, CalCare only covers Vyvanse, the name brand, for free. They do not cover generic. Why? Because I'm guessing they made a deal with Vyvanse, like the company behind Vyvanse. So you can't get the generic, even though they can have like a fuck ton of generic Vyvanse without the name brand. Okay, so yeah, there you go.
said I interrupted you. Let me finish. I'm saying that the reason why they should have reignited that conversation is because those two things aren't unrelated. The reason why we have such a difficult time managing these influxes of all of these things is because they don't do education to explain to people there's push factors and there's pull factors when it comes to immigration, right? And these people are fleeing destabilized countries, so that's a push factor that we can try to intervene using like foreign aid, USAID, and then there's pull factors where people are incentivized to come to this country because they want to work, right? And you explained that's a good thing, right? We want there to be more economic participation. These people are a net positive to the economy. That's good for you. That's good for prices in the United States. But the reason why we're having a difficult time managing all of these people and why you don't need to be scared is just because we need to have the administrative processes in place to be able to accommodate influxes like this when you see spikes in immigration, which, like you're saying, unprecedented.
Where is that?
Unprecedented.
I don't know, like what polling you're looking at to think that would have like.
That's super weird. They don't cover the generic. Who knows? Like my fucking inner lefty brain is like, oh my God, I knew it. These pharmaceutical companies are evil. All they want is for them to get all the business. And they don't want anyone to get anything from the generics. But then in my mind, like my reasonable logic brain is telling me, oh, it's probably because the legislation hasn't caught up yet or something. I don't know, some reasonable reason or whatever.
So you're saying as president,
I'm not looking at polling. This is again, I'm spitballing here.
Right?
I didn't say that I'm closed off to listen to looking at polling. I just said what I just told you is what I think ought to happen, and I can I'll bring polling in to inform how I go, the finer points of it. But broadly speaking, that would be my strategy.
Okay, but how you feel about it personally is different from what is the correct decision for a president to make. And so, like, if you're President Straighterade and the country has seen like record.
Oh God, please never say that again. That literally just gave me like a fucking heart attack. President Straighterade? Oh my God, I am the most sexist motherfucker all of a sudden, okay? Jesus Christ. I'm right here, you don't even want the stinky generic Vyvanse anyway. The issue with potency is what are you talking about? It's the same fucking thing. It's literally the same fucking thing. Like, generic Vyvanse, it's the same thing.
Levels of influx sustained over like 6 or 7 months. Now,
it's
literally, it's like 800,000 people showing up a month at the border. You're saying, and your numbers are getting lower and lower and lower on like the border, right? Like you're getting really unpopular on the border with the American public because they're seeing the images of just like the chaos, right? What would you have done? Like, how would you have addressed that? You would have gone up there and said, guys, don't be scared. We need to just like, we should let everybody in. Is that what you're saying?
No. Where did I ever say we need to let everybody in? Give me a break. You change the narrative, change the conversation, respond to people's needs. You meet them where they're at. You comfort them, but you don't.
They've done tests and generics aren't held to the same standards. Well, at that point, if I have to decide between 1 week's worth of name brand Vyvanse and let's just say I have a choice of having like an entire 1 month worth of generic Vyvanse, I am choosing the generic Vyvanse. I hate.
Truly, this is the dankest dungeon.
Yo, Akimoy. Thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs. Okay. Same with my Medicaid. They cite the most effective, but it definitely has some deal involved. Foodshops technically is the same thing, like how Great Valley has the same orange juice as Sunny D. Sure. Yeah, it is the exact same thing. I've done it before. Like, I've had replacement brand and replacement non-brands before. It's happened. Yeah.
Don't have to accommodate them to the point that you cave to where people were feeling on that issue, and
but you're not actually addressing what's happening how does educating the public help Border Patrol and the facilities that we have in place?
Do you think that people's attitudes in this country are tied to empirical realities? They're not. They're tied to media narrative, sensationalism, what they ambiently consume on their social media feeds, what Republicans tell them, what Democrats tell them, what news tells them.
So don't do anything.
Can you please contend with that point, Hutch? Jesus Christ. I am telling you that you are acting like the average person, the average voter, has a completely rational assessment of what is going on in this world. And they're not. I'm saying you're assuming. I didn't say that you explicitly argued it, that you sound like you are, because you're like, they're seeing all these people come in at the border, right? There's like so many different times where you're like,
80% of the chat is on this stuff. ADHD people at a young age is attracted more to the internet. Like they gravitate towards the internet way more than people who are not without ADHD. So there is a selection bias. Yep. Which is why a lot of people who are terminally online tend to be ADHD, because they use the internet as a way to stimulate their ADHD. Yeah, which is why a lot of people here would naturally have ADHD. Yes.
Joe Biden was the most progressive on the border, and you're like zooming out to things that nobody can ever see, because when people are judging a president, they don't judge it based off of what Obama did and what Bill Clinton did, and they don't zoom out and look at like a broad trend. They just look at what he's doing and go from there, right? And then you make the argument they ought to zoom out and take into account how far left Democrats have moved, and that Joe Biden's actually progressive on this, right?
Nice vibe theory. It's just true. It's true. You know what? I'm not even going to get rage baited, okay? I'm not going to get one guy from some nobody in DG chat, okay?
Okay, similarly, you can do the same thing when it comes to immigration. Ask people to zoom out and do that same sort of voter education,
well,
right?
I'm basically asking, like, what choice did Biden have to not take action on the border? Like, first of all, do you even agree that the border did become a problem? Like, there were problems at the border on his watch?
Yeah, of course.
Like, what do you think those problems were?
Managing this influx of people and processing them in a way that we don't have the infrastructure to deal with, because it's been an issue that has been neglected by both parties for years. And to the extent that Republicans have answers, they want to do things like mass deportation programs, which are turning out to be very, very unpopular, thankfully. But polling data that we were seeing in 2024, there was a poll that showed 70% of Americans, they loved mass deportations. Then you explain to that same cohort of people, here's how you get that program off the ground. The same amount of people opposed it, because the median voter wants all the groceries in one bag, and they don't want the bag to be heavy. So they said they wanted mass deportations, but they didn't actually want it in practice, and you see that reflected now.
And similarly, we're talking about border policy. I'm not talking about removals from the country. So you say that there was a problem at the border. I agree. Like, what would you have done about the border? I'm not talking about.
But it's a humanitarian problem for those people. It's not for Americans.
But why? I'm just asking you, like, what would you have done specifically, like, about the border if you were in Biden's shoes?
Specifically about the border, you have to there's.
I would have fucked your mom.
I have a satisfying, like, salient answer. Okay, you answer that question first, okay, and then I will answer.
I think at minimum you need to, like, build more facilities, because if you have a situation where 800,000 people are showing up and your facilities are not meant to house that many people, that's when you end up with totally inhumane living conditions. So, like, at minimum, we're talking about providing more resources to our agencies that deal with this kind of influx. I do like
Congress, correct?
I do like the provisions
Congress,
in the bill
that involves Congress. Joe Biden can't do that himself. What you just outlined needs Congress, right?
That was a part of the immigration bill.
Right, the bill. So, like, the president, and you know that the president doesn't pass legislation, right? But they can have a hand in changing the conversation and pushing narratives. And whipping their party?
Wait, I'm so confused where you're going with this. I don't understand.
You asked me what should Joe Biden have done in response to the border crisis, and I said, while I get my answer together, why don't you answer that? And you said they need to have more facilities built so they can accommodate the influx of all of these people coming across the border. And I said that would have taken Congress, right? And you said, yeah, a bill. But if you asked me what should Joe Biden do specifically, so you didn't even answer your own question, or you're willing to bring in Congress into that.
Hold on. The president negotiates with the Congress constantly on bills. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I didn't say that he wasn't involved in legislation. I said that he cannot unilaterally pass it.
No, but his administration was directly negotiating with Republicans over that bill, which included these provisions, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So why? Okay, but if your answer involves some form of him going to Congress and engaging in negotiations to pass legislation, why can't my answer?
We are 1 hour in. We are 1 hour in. And we've gotten nowhere. Nice.
Answer also involved that. You're like, no.
Well, no,
what should Biden himself specifically do? And I'm talking about not only changing the narratives, but also, okay, you weren't listening to what I said with respect to him changing the conversation, and you didn't like it.
What you would do about the border, and you said, let me think about it, and you couldn't, like. So let me just ask.
I said things before that.
No, she's not a closet tinky. She's like openly ML. It's just that Hutch is like a pushover. He's like a fucking carpet.
Can you recall any of them?
Yeah, you were talking about shifting the narrative and educating people about a pathway to citizenship. I'm asking about the border.
Pathway to citizenship, Hutch. Keep going. So what are we talking about? Immigration reform. That would involve Congress, and Biden could have helped whip Democrats in so they could expand, so they could reform immigration in this country.
Aaron, you criticized the Democrats because you said that they moved, like, massively to the right on immigration. And I made the point that the border is just one issue when it comes to immigration, and that Joe Biden was just objectively, like, pro-immigrant by any reasonable metric. And then I asked you, like, okay, you're criticizing him on the border.
Sure.
Well, what else? How else do we determine these kinds of things? But, like, when I asked you specifically about
by an objective standard, not a relative standard of how previous presidents acted,
when
right?
When I asked you, like,
wait, can you engage with what I just said? That is a way to determine it, right? Hutch, that is a way to determine it, right?
Just tell me, like, if you don't like what he did on the border, I just want to know what the Aaron version is of, like, you have this political problem, you're getting a ton of pressure from your own constituents to act on the border. What do you do? And you said, just, like, pathway to citizenship. That doesn't answer the question. Like, you
It's
still
such a straw man that you're like not engaging with what I'm saying at all. If you're trying to boil it down to literally just that, I was the starting point of one thing, and then you interrupted and you were like, "Give me the exact prescription."
you are the one that criticized Biden and the Democrats on immigration.
Yeah.
And then
You said he
brought
was the
up
most
border
pro-immigration
bill.
president, but he also closed the border unconstitutionally. You know that, right?
That was in response to unprecedented in modern times.
He still did it,
global
Hutch. I don't
pandemic.
give a fuck what he was responding to. I am saying objectively, he made a move
That's
that went
fine.
against the rest of his
If
record.
you want to criticize him for his border policy, that's fine.
Will you criticize him for that?
I am asking you.
Hutch,
what
I'm asking
your
you, will you criticize him for
prescriptive
that?
analysis for that situation was. Like,
Hutch,
if you
I'm
think that it was
asking-
totally
it's
unacceptable,
bad. I think it's bad. Hutch, will you criticize him for it now?
I would have to take a look at specifically what you're talking about. Like, I'm not
When he
100%
closed the
sure.
border.
Are you talking about the executive action that he took after
Joe
the
Biden.
immigration bill passed? Give me 1 second, by the way. I'll be literally
Unconstitutional.
2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, okay, I found it.
Are you talking about the executive action that he took after the bill failed?
I'm looking at a press release from the ACLU. Let me send it to you so you can pull up what I'm looking at. I'm sending it to you in DMs. Executive order to shut down the border would put thousands of lives at risk. This was June 4th, 2024.
Yeah,
and
this
it
was
opens
after-
the White House released today a fact sheet announcing details on an impending executive action from the Biden admin
Yeah.
that will severely restrict people's legal right to seek asylum.
Yeah.
Among the measures announced, the admin will effectively shut off asylum for the overwhelming majority of people arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border once the average number of border encounters reaches 2,500 between ports of entry,
Right.
reopening only once a daily
I'm
number
very,
declines to
very familiar
1,500.
with this. Yeah, I'm very
Okay, well,
familiar
2
with
seconds ago, you seemed unfamiliar. So.
No, I asked you, hang on. I asked you to specify what you were talking about. I'm absolutely familiar with this executive order that he did after the bipartisan immigration bill was spiked by Donald Trump, after it was negotiated for like 6 months. The reason why...
Or by Republicans, right?
By Trump and Republicans, yeah. They had negotiated with the administration for months to iron out a bill. It was ready to pass. It didn't pass.
When you say
and so-
Trump, it sounds weird because he's like, he wasn't in office, he was running, but those Republicans acted because Trump, like, they wanted to, like, as Kamala put it, run out a problem instead of a solution.
He picked up the phone and called senators and said, don't give him a win. Like, that's literally what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we got a little sidetracked there. But I felt like I wanted to sort of just get your position
will
on...
you criticize that, though?
Wait,
Did you think that this was
keep
good?
avoiding this. Why do you keep avoiding this?
Did you think this was good or bad?
No, I'm not going to let you
that he
avoid
did
this.
this?
Okay? Like, I want you to articulate the alternative plan that you have in terms of how President Aaron would have addressed the border.
Second.
This should have been from the very beginning. This should have been, you should have asked her for a prescription from the very beginning. Like, what was even the point? Like, endless critique? Just endless critique. Just endlessly trying to defend the Democratic Party against Aaron's fucking bad faith criticisms. Like, stop! Stop pretending that these fucking lefties have the Democrats' like best fucking interests in mind. Stop. Stop this. They want to see the Democratic Party crash and burn. They want to see the Democratic Party fucking die. They are accelerationists. She's an accelerationist. You're engaging with her bad faith points. You shouldn't even be engaging in the first place. You should just be getting straight to the core of the argument, which is, Aaron, I think you're a fucking retard. End of story. Stop being a Marxist-Leninist. It has no use here in the Democratic Party. We should cast you out. Done. It's not hard to do.
I told you I would have had the president change the narrative, respond to, like, Biden didn't do nearly enough addresses to the American public when you can compare him to past presidencies who did a lot more television engagement, speeches, etc. because of his age, right? Either he or Kamala Harris, ideally both, should have had a televised announcement addressing this border crisis, explained the reasons why it's happening, and also said, I am going to work diligently with congressional representatives, with Democratic senators, Republican senators, and any Republican Congress people that will work with me to overhaul immigration and provide both short-term solutions that are going to alleviate and be able to help accommodate the influx of migrants that we're seeing at the border and accommodate them, as well as couple that with longer-term immigration reform to help provide people with a pathway to citizenship. Because the conversation ends up including that, because people, again, it's this, like, immigration and the border, it's like a broad thing under what people just deem to be like the immigration conversation. I don't see why it has to be just like this tunnel vision focus on just that. It can also be saying that, like, hey, these two things are not unrelated. We need to do both at the same time if we want to address what's going on now at the border and help prevent it from happening in the future.
Wait, now hold on. when I look at the provisions in the bipartisan bill, so I feel like he did a lot of what you just laid out. Like, I feel like they did get up there and they talked about the need for comprehensive and compassionate immigration reform. But the political reality that they were dealing with in late 2023 and early 2024 when they were negotiating this bill was a divided government where Republicans controlled the House. And so you had to negotiate with them if you were going to do any kind of bill, right? So like, it's going to be a bill where you're going to get some of the things that you like and they're going to get some of the things that they like. If it was just a unified Congress and they had enough to break a filibuster, or they just got rid of the filibuster, then they can do all kinds of stuff. But he was forced in a position where he had to negotiate. That was the bill that they came up with. But you're accusing like the Democratic Party broadly of like moving.
Is it a rhetoric practice for Hutch? Maybe, but I would appreciate it if Hutch would actually learn from his debates and not like stay the same every time. Every time it's the same debate, and every time we get nowhere. He doesn't improve. Oh my god. Okay, it's okay. I'm okay.
Super right on immigration. But I don't think
they did because that bipartisan border bill had just they completely conceded to a ton of Republican demands on it, and then they didn't even vote for it. They didn't even secure the votes that they needed to pass that bipartisan bill. So now all you've done is shifted the Overton window on that specific issue for no material gain, because Republicans don't want to hand Biden a win because he will have been seen as fixing the border crisis and reforming immigration. And so that's why Trump said you can't give him this, and he's not wrong in the sense that Americans would see that as a win for Biden.
I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are certain political realities that are really difficult to ignore when you're in a leadership position. And I think that you're choosing to ignore the enormous amount of pressure that he and the entire Democratic Party were facing when it came to immigration. And I think your theory of the case is that you just have to make a convincing enough argument and you can just change everybody's mind. Like, I think you
Green Lantern theory of politics. You think I'm falling right into what Ezra describes, or what?
A bit, yeah. A bit. Yeah.
Novel Hutch. Okay. I think that
why the fuck is this still a term? Stop using this term, Green Lantern theory of politics. God, you sound so retarded. Stop using this. The term makes zero sense. It makes zero sense. I don't get where this term comes from. Hutch has graduated from Wake TV University with a summa cum laude, and let's be friends and debate in circles and accomplish nothing as long as we don't call each other names. Yeah, but that's bad for content. Like, this isn't even good for content. Like, I would appreciate like long-term farming for content if Hutch was actually fired up at some point. But it feels like he's just like fucking Finesteride or fucking SSRI'd. Like, that's what it feels like. It feels like Hutch is on some kind of like fucking antidepressant medication, but it's not the right one, and he just can't muster up any energy.
The issue with that is that Ezra Klein makes salient points in that, but I think he also severely underestimates the amount of power that a president can have in not only shaping the narratives and conversations surrounding any issue that's pressing in American politics, but also through executive action. And that's ultimately what Joe Biden resorted to doing once he was stopped at Congress, right? But he ultimately took an unconstitutional action. And now that I've answered your question, I'm going to ask you, did you approve of Joe Biden's executive action to shut down the border that put these people trying to seek asylum at risk?
Yeah.
I understood the political realities at the time.
Yeah. I am going to be a little mean, okay? Because I'm angry at Hutch. I'm irritated, okay? And we don't have much of a bridge, okay? I don't think so. He doesn't even respond to any of my DMs, except for that one time where he called in through stream. So I think I'm good, okay?
And so I understood that was something that he didn't really have a choice to act on. He had to do something. There was really no option for him not to do anything.
So you supported it.
You said a moment ago that...
Wait, Hutch, yes or no? You supported it then?
Generally,
yes?
yeah, I did, yeah.
Okay, that's all I was asking. And I don't think that comports with him being a super pro-immigration president. Yes, there's other things in his record I'm not going to ignore or downplay, but this specific action is a backsliding on that.
You said that you would want to take an action as president to stem the flow of the influx, right? I think those were your exact words, right? You would have to address...
To manage them.
To manage those levels. That is what the purpose of that shutdown was. You understand that? Like, the reason why we get so many people show up at our borders because we have an asylum system where if they meet a certain kind of criteria, they're allowed into the country while the claim is adjudicated. But right now, those laws were written when they were not dealing with like this kind of influx. So like, how would you like manage the flow of people showing up at the border without addressing
this gets so funny
asylum?
Later on. Okay, I trust.
I don't know how you would do that. I don't think you can do that.
Well, I mean, Biden felt that he couldn't figure out any other way other than to bring forth an executive action that was unconstitutional. So ultimately, when you say you support him taking the action, you supported him taking a risk that he probably knew was going to be found unconstitutional. You think he didn't know that before he signed the executive order?
I don't know if it was found unconstitutional. I don't know if it was ever challenged.
It was found unconstitutional.
His executive order was found unconstitutional? I don't think that's true. Where are you getting that?
It might not have been related to this specifically, but there was a different thing. Hold on, give me a second.
I think you're talking about like Title 42 or something. I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't think his executive order was challenged in court and overthrown or overturned.
Give me a second. Let me see. I swear it was. Hold on. But principally what I'm asking is, do you support Democratic presidents resorting to measures that are likely unconstitutional to address acute political problems that they're facing?
I mean, I don't certainly know enough about the law to opine about the unconstitutionality of things. I leave that to the Piscos and the other legal commentators of the world. Like, do I think presidents should be doing unconstitutional things? No, I don't think so. But, I can't articulate like why.
Well, I'm not. That's why I'm saying in just a broad, abstract sense, not speaking to a specific policy. But when Democrats are facing an issue where you're seeing the poll numbers, their approval ratings tanking, their poll numbers tanking.
Why the fuck is this space like? I'm sorry. Why the fuck is this Twitch poll space like filled with low energy motherfuckers? Okay, stop. All right, this is why Twitch poll never had longevity to it. Okay, nobody has any fire. There's no fire in anybody. There's no. Where's the fire? It's always ooh 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 ooh. Oh my god, big booba girl. Ooh ooh, gotta go soft. So okay, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. That's too mean. That's too unhinged. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay.
On a specific issue, they're not able to whip congressional votes to get legislation passed to address it. So all they're left with is executive actions. And at that point, do you support a Democratic president to undertake, like signing executive actions that they are being advised this is likely unconstitutional to address an acute issue? Yes or no?
I don't. So, I'm sorry. So your legal counsel is telling you this is likely unconstitutional? Is that what happened with Biden?
I'm asking you in an this is a hypothetical question, Hutch. Not specific to Biden, a Democratic president. I don't know who it is. Just I'm asking you, do you support them?
Advised,
Hutch, I'm trying to explain the question to you.
Your point. I understand. If any president is advised by their own legal counsel, the White House counsel, that something that they're doing is unconstitutional, then
likely unconstitutional.
Then broadly, I oppose doing that. But would you concede that there would be times where maybe it would make sense? So like I've heard the live and learn guys many times suggest the idea of like the next Democratic president should just like do things that they anticipate would, they would use the immunity ruling basically to like stretch that out to see like just how far they could take it, just to make the point that the ruling was unconstitutional or the ruling was ridiculous. Like you've heard that logic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I don't support that. No.
Oh, okay. Well.
I think like Judge Dugan, who is arrested, is like her legal counsel is trying to use the immunity ruling as like case law or precedent to support the actions that she took to like allegedly guide that person who was undocumented out of her courtroom or something, and that under the immunity ruling that she's one of these like public servants and like as a judge who has the authority to conduct her courtroom as she sees fit, and they're citing that as one of them. I don't support that because I think you're expanding legal precedent of what is fundamentally an unconstitutional and unjust ruling, and so it's dangerous to do that even for Democrats to try to use it like selectively, because that case law could be used by literally anybody to continue advancing rulings, building on the precedent that the dangerous precedent that was set by the immunity ruling. So there's times where no, to me, because I think the long-term consequences are too severe to prioritize these short-term gains that could be extracted by Democrats or even progressives, and some like progressive Democrats in some instances. I think it's too much of it's like if we're looking at the pros and cons, I think the cons outweigh the pros in that instance.
Well, we can kind of like bounce off of your logic here to get to sort of like a different but related conversation, which is I just want to focus on this idea.
Oh my god.